everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Helen and today I'm bringing to you my Eurovisionathon wrap up. I read 20 books and I'm chuffed with that. It's not the most I've read. I think I worked out that I'd read 21 or 22 as my most, but I really had a good month with it. So I came fourth on the leaderboard and I scored 2,881 points. And the beauty of this readathon is the person who won had read less books than a few of us, but had picked the right countries. So I think she'd read 16 books and scored 3,215 points. So congratulations to Pugwash. Altogether, all of us read 373 books and that was 80,332 pages. I contributed 5,409 of those pages. So I'm going to quickly talk you through the books and the countries that I read them for, the star rating that I gave them, and whether they got in or out, because obviously some of my countries got kicked out. So yeah, I can't remember a lot about some of them. When you read 20 books like that so quickly, it can be hard to keep track, but I will try my best. So for the first one I read was for Sweden, and it was called Big in Sweden by Sally Franson. That was 309 pages. I gave it 3 stars. It's basically about a girl who, I think she's American, but she applies for a Swedish television show, like a reality show, where if she wins, she gets to meet her Swedish ancestors that are still living. It was okay. The 3-star shows that it was just okay. But it was the first one I went with. I'd been either gifted that by a publisher or the publisher put out that they had some copies to give away, and I was successful in getting one of those copies. But I did tell them that I was saving it for April for Eurovisionathon, and so I read that first. For many of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The first 9, I got Sophie to spin a wheel that I had all of the countries represented on my phone, and she picked the countries in the order that I was going to do them. Then I got to the point where I thought I haven't read all of the big 5 yet, and so I then read some of those. And then towards the end, it was, especially after the 2 semi-finals had been, I was then trying to look what countries had got through and try and read some of those or cram some of those in. So secondly, I read for Belgium, and that was The Restoration of Otto Lard, and that was by Nigel Packer. I gave this 5 stars. It was 344 pages. It's about an old gentleman who lives, is he from Belgium or he goes back to Belgium? No, I think he lives in Switzerland originally. Not 100%, but anyway, he helped build a building. He was an architect and finds out that this building is going to be knocked down, and so he goes to try and stop it from being knocked down. Years ago he'd lived in it for a documentary. I don't know, I think it was just to show that he was willing to live in what he'd built. And when he went back, he could see that it was not in a great condition and it was used for people who weren't as well off. And so he agreed with a company to go and do a documentary again and live in it himself. But obviously he was an old man at this point. So yeah. And I obviously enjoyed it because I gave it 5 stars. It did tug at the heartstrings. Then I read for the UK, and I read The Air Affair by Jasper Ford. This was my 3rd or 4th reading of this book. It was 373 pages. I gave it 4 stars. I found this slow to begin with, and I don't know if it was because I knew it was a reread and I was eager to read new books for Eurovisionathon because I was excited for new books. But I'd started a read along of this in my Discord and on this channel for anybody who wanted to join in, and it was going to be for every month until the new book comes out and the final book. I've since found out that the new book doesn't come out till next year, and so I'm doing it bi-monthly. So the next one I'm going to read, the second book, The Lost in a Good Book, I'm going to read that in June. So yeah, it started off slow, but then by the time I got to the end, I realised why I liked it so much. And I met Jasper Ford recently. I mentioned that in a video. I went to Neston Library for a author chat, I really enjoyed that. So I'm looking forward to carrying on with the series. If you can hear treacle, it sounds like she's messing with the cat litter. I apologise. So next I read for Switzerland. I read a book called Slow Train to Switzerland by Deacon Buse. It was 293 pages. I gave it 2 stars. This really was a slow train to Switzerland. And what I realised during this readathon is maybe train journey books aren't for me. Because what I want them to do is talk about the people they met along the way, maybe on the train and off the train, and the sights they saw. And with this, it was just went into too much detail about the train journeys and certain parts of Switzerland. It wasn't, I want to know about the people and the exciting things they saw. I don't want to know a load of stats. So yes, I will, if there are other books by that author, I won't be reading them again. He was following on from a journey, I think by Thomas Cook or one of those travel companies. Obviously the person who started the travel company years ago started with a first cohort of people that they took abroad and then escalated it out to other countries with lots more people, and so he was trying to follow on those journeys at the places they'd stayed. Just wasn't feeling it. Then I read for Iceland, and I was hoping to read Butterflies in November because I've wanted to read that for a while. That one, no, the Navy one, because I've read from that author before. But then a publisher was giving out copies of this book by Kat Gordon, and I really fancied it. I managed to get a copy, and so I promised I would read it for Eurovisionathon for Iceland. I'm glad I did. I gave it 5 stars. It was 318 pages. It was about 2 sisters, like years and years and years ago in Iceland, like in the 1800s, I want to say. Their experiences, a lot happens to them in that time. It starts off with this book where a body is found, like I think it's in the more towards the current day, like 80s, I think. A body is found, and at least one of these sisters is around, and you know that they know who this probably is, and it unfolds in the story. So yeah, it was intriguing from the beginning, and I just love the writing style. So if Kat Gordon does anything else, I will be reading it. Not necessarily if it's for Iceland, but if it fit in with Eurovisionathon, that would be great. The next one I read was for Australia. So up till then, so Belgium went out, so I lost Belgium. And then up till that point it was fine. Then I read for Australia, and Australia also went out the competition. This was 402 pages. This wasn't one. So for Big in Sweden, I did plan to read that. Restoration of Otto Lad, I hoped to read that, and I'm glad because that had been on my shelf for a while. The Air Affair was a reread, but I intended to read that one. Slow Train to Switzerland had been on my pile for a while, so I was made up that one was gone. The Swell was new, and I'd promised to read it, so that's why I read that one. Australia, I had some ideas in mind, but then I went to the library this particular morning, and found The Last Piece of My Heart by Paige Toon. I read the back, it looked really good, and so it didn't take me long to read. I give it 4 stars. It was about a woman who was a writer, and a publisher had asked her if she would basically continue writing a book for a lady who'd passed away. She was a young mum, and she'd written a book that was really popular, and then had started writing the second one, and then she'd sadly passed away from an illness. And so they asked this author if she'd step in and complete the book. She had to go and work at this woman's house with her partner living there, who was looking after their newborn baby, relatively newborn baby. And so it's about that relationship and how she kind of stepping into this woman's shoes and tiptoeing around family members who aren't that happy with her doing it. And the closeness of her to the husband. And so it was a lovely book, again, that pulled at your heartstrings, because at the back of this she's also doing a vlog going back out with her previous exes, and meeting up with her exes from the past and kind of asking them for the piece of the heart that she's left with them. So it focuses on that as well. So I'm not sad that I read it, but I was gutted that Australia were out for that reason. And apparently that was a shock that Australia were going out. I don't listen to any of the songs beforehand because I want it to be a surprise on the night, but apparently people were shocked that Australia weren't in. Then I buddy read The Fiancé Dilemma by Elena Armas. This was for Spain. This was 413 pages. Ellie asked me if I'd buddy read it. I had a couple of ideas for Spain, but obviously I wanted to do a buddy read with Ellie, so I did it. This was 3 stars. If you want to see what Ellie thought of it, she's just put a Eurovisionathon vlog up and talked about it, but we had very similar views. We started off with it. She was more keen at the beginning than I was, but then realised what I meant when she got a bit further along. In the middle, it got quite good and was quite a page turner. And then at the end, I was so disappointed with the ending, and I'd had enough by then. Apparently, Ellie had liked another of her books and said that was really good. So maybe this one was just a blip, or I don't know which one came first. But I have learned that unless I'm absolutely positive that I want to read a book there and then, probably not to pick such a long book for Eurovisionathon that I'm not as bothered about. But I'd bought Ellie a copy for, I think, Christmas, and then I'd got a copy so we could read it together. So it's done, it's dusted. It wasn't absolutely awful, which is why I gave it 3 stars, but yeah, I was disappointed. Then I read for Azerbaijan, again another country that went out, very disappointing, but I enjoyed this book. It was called I Sat Alone by the Gate, and it was by Miri Effendi. I gave it 5 stars. It was 378 pages. I read it via Borrow Box from a library, or Everand. I think I read this one from Everand. And this is one that I'd had on my list in the past, but I wasn't convinced I was going to read it this year, and I did. It's about a girl who's come from Azerbaijan, but she regularly references it throughout the book, travels to America and is trying to fit in there. Family have to move from place to place because where they first start living doesn't work out for them, and so they move to like 2 or 3 different places. She has a really bad experience in one of the jobs that she works in, which she was really happy in. And then she's kind of, it talks about a relationship that she did have, and then a relationship that you think she's going to develop, and then another relationship. Yeah, it's very much a, what's the word? Like a growing up story. You can see this girl grow up as the book goes along, but I enjoyed it. And yeah, it's showing other cultures moving to a new country and trying to fit in, and that's quite hard to read at times. Then I read a really odd book for Finland. I went to a local library. I didn't know really what I wanted to read for Finland, so I ended up just typing different things for Europe and like typed Finland into the catalogue while I was there, and found this book called Secret Passages in a Hillside Town, and this was by Pasi Ilmari Jarkskalainer. It was 404 pages. I gave it 2 stars. By the way, I'm just reading this. I've got it all down on this chart. It was odd. It's talking about these kids in a hillside town who discover these secret tunnels, and then they go in them, and then somebody they go in with disappears, but then this new person appears in the place from under this tunnel, and then they get to know this person. It was just very weird, and it talks about fairies and at first I'd give this 3 stars because I liked the writing style, but there was a part in this book that you could basically say it was an attack on a trans person. And yeah, it just didn't sit well with me. I docked it by another star, but even now I still will not forget this book because it was memorable, but not necessarily in a good way, because it was so odd. I didn't half the time know what had gone on. This attack happened, but by the end you can't tell if this person was where they'd gone, how they'd come, whether this was some kind of not an allegorical message, some kind of hidden message, meaning behind it. Was just too obscure to be like, oh, that's the message they're trying to give. And yeah, and the attack was absolutely horrible. The way it was described, you kind of got hints of what had happened or what was going to happen, and then not obviously told all about it. So yeah, if you've read that book, let me know. I don't think I'd read something by the author again because I just didn't understand why they'd gone this way in the story as well. I thought to come up with something like that, I was just like, ooh. I'm not sure even now what I think about book, and maybe I'll move my rating altogether. Yeah, because it started out where it was just, it seemed like a normal story. You thought you knew what was going to come, and then in the middle of it, I just didn't know what was happening. I really didn't know what was happening. Yeah. Then at least Finland went through, so I got some points for that. Then I read a book for Italy, so when it got to this point, this is when I started thinking, right, I need to start thinking about covering some of the big 5 countries. So I read for Italy. I wasn't going to read this one for Italy, I was going to do it for Austria. It was a really tiny book. It was 192 pages, and it was called Not Cool, Europe by Train in a Heatwave. That was on my wish list. I'm part of a birthday book club on Instagram, and somebody chose this off my wish list, which I was delighted with. I was disappointed with this book. I gave it 2 stars. Again, this was another book that made me realise maybe train journey books aren't for me. It didn't explore enough of the places for me. There was a lot of discussions of the travel stuff in general. Yeah, it just wasn't interesting or exciting. And again, I want to know about the people there. I want to know about interesting things about the culture. I don't want to know about train timetables and struggling with the journey. I just don't. Then I read what I think was my favourite book of the readathon. It was called Walking Back to Happiness. I read it for France. It was by Penelope Swithenbank. Not Cool Europe one was by Jules Brown, by the way. Yeah, so Walking Back to Happiness by Penelope Swithenbank. This was 231 pages. Yeah. And I gave it 5 stars. It was about a couple, a man and a wife who both have been pastors in the past. Basically Christian worship, and they are struggling in their marriage, and they decide to go on this massive walk across France. And I love like pilgrimage type stories anyway. What I liked about this one is, although they were clearly Christian and come from a religious background, it wasn't shoved down your throat throughout the book, but they weren't shying away from the fact that they were from a religious background. But it was more concentrating on what they experienced during the walk, the people that they met along the way. You know, obviously some people were friendly, some people not so much, where they stayed, how they managed to find places to stay, how they enjoyed the journey, and how their relationship developed over the time. But I just loved it, and so I gave it 5 stars. So yes, and if that woman decides to do any more walks and write about it, I will be there reading. I now follow her on Instagram. Then I read a really tiny book called Snake Town by Toby Wilshire. I read this for Ukraine. Did I say it was 148 pages? I keep losing my track. I gave this 3 stars. This was an odd book. It was based in Ukraine. It was focusing on a mum and a daughter who live in a flat, and they rent out the other flat within their building. They rent it out to 2 people, but both people don't know that they're renting it. So they rent it to somebody in the morning, then they go off to work for the night, and then the other person uses it of the night, but they don't know that. So each time the person goes out for their nighttime job, and before the next person comes in from the job they've just finished to sleep for the night, they change all the stuff over. They take pictures so they know where everything goes and what's been moved and not. But at the end, it's kind of like I can't say because I don't want to spoil it, but it's like, it's got a really dramatic ending, and yeah, you're just like, I'm sure this couldn't have gone on for as long as it did, and nobody realised. So yeah, it was. I gave it 3 stars because it was entertaining as well as quite dark. So yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of it's the same kind of concept, I suppose, as Flatshare by Beth O'Leary, except those people know that they're both using the same bed. These people didn't know. Then I read a tiny book called The Herdsman of Wolves by Tamuna Sertsvats, and that was for Georgia. It was 92 pages. I gave it 3 stars. This was written by this person when they were really young, but it was a nice story. Basically about a boy who is basically brought up by wolves and rescues this girl from this family. It was just a nice story. It's kind of memorable, but also there are parts of it that I would easily forget. But because it was so short, you don't get a lot of information. So yeah, had a good time with it, but Georgia went out, so I lost out to that one. Then I read one called The Beardless Adventurer and Her Inconvenience. This was by Donna Marie Ashton. It was 250 pages and it was for Germany, and I gave it 4 stars. It was another kind of pilgrimagey type book. Her and her partner jump on bicycles and go all across different countries. I could have used this for many things, and I think at some point I was going to read it for Serbia, but I ended up reading it for Germany, because by the point where I'm starting to think I need books for the big 5, I'm looking through any books to see, specifically books that you could use for multiple countries, to think of how I can fit it in for those main countries. So yeah, I had a good time. Unfortunately, this woman's website isn't there anymore, because I like to then follow the people. But yeah, she mustn't be writing anymore about travel. Then I read another travel non-fiction book. This was for Albania by Jacqueline Armour, and it's called Follow Your Joy. This was 269 pages. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. She travels to lots of obscure countries. I was going to use this for San Marino, because that can be a hard one to read for. I think during this book she'd travelled to a 90th country, and that was San Marino. So I knew she was going to finish it off there, or it kind of started there. I can't remember which. But I wanted to read for Albania, because I think at this point I'd realised that Albania had gone through. So I decided to read it for Albania. And the beauty of it was I'd put it up on I looked for her on Instagram and just followed her. I don't think I tagged her in my post, but she found it anyway. And so she was made up that I'd read her book for this. So yeah, I will continue to look at her journeys. I think she's just come back from, I want to say Iraq or Iran. So yeah, she's not shy of travelling on her own to some of these places. And what I liked about that book, it was looking at it from a safety aspect as well, for a woman travelling on her own, and the experiences she'd had. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Then I read one for the Netherlands that I'd found on BorrowBox from my library. I wasn't expecting to read this one for the Netherlands. I wasn't even sure I was going to read for the Netherlands this time. But I read one called Sister Peters in Amsterdam by Betty Niels. This was 224 pages. I ended up giving this 5 stars. This was like a historical fiction romance, kind of Mills and Boon, I think. But it didn't read like a Mills and Boon. But I just really loved it. She's a nurse. She gets like almost headhunted from the UK to go and work in Amsterdam, and she develops a relationship with the gentleman who is her boss. And yeah, it was just a real nice cozy romance, and I really enjoyed it. Then I was trying to cram in some countries in the last few days, and I chose Ireland, and Ireland went out, but I wasn't too worried about it because it was an audiobook. It was a Claire Keegan audiobook, and the book equivalent for this was 64 pages. It didn't take me long to listen to it at all. It was called So Late in the Day, and it was about a fella who were looking at him post breakup. He'd obviously proposed to his partner, and it had got nearer and nearer the time of their wedding, and she decided that she didn't want to be married anymore. But you're looking back and looking at how that all come about. It was good. I'd read another Claire Keegan, particularly during Eurovisionathon, if they're that short. But yeah, my problem with it was just there wasn't enough of it to be as invested. Then I read a book for Israel called The Land Beneath the Light, and that was by Shireen Malherbe, and it was 229 pages. This was listed as a retelling of Jane Eyre. I've read Jane Eyre. I really enjoyed it. I couldn't see the link between Jane Eyre and this story in any way. So, if you've read Jane Eyre and you've read this book, I would like you to tell me how it links, because I don't think it does. But having said that, I still liked it. And actually, when I look at the star rating and from what I can remember of the story, I'm thinking I probably should have listed it higher. It's about a girl who lives with her mum, and she is looking back at something that had happened in her childhood, and she keeps referring back to this. but also you get this sense of danger that she's in where she lives in Israel. There's still a lot of unrest. And then when her mum passes away, she goes through a lot there as well. And yeah, it was really quite good. Then I found a book on Borrow Box. I give Sophie the option of what country I could read this for, because there was multiple countries I could have read this little book for. It was 176 pages. It was called The House of Cats. The cover was gorgeous, like purple with cats on, and it's by Maggie Payson. I gave this 5 stars because it was like folk tales from different countries, and I just really enjoyed it. It didn't take me long to read at all. Kind of wish Sophie had picked a different country. I could have read this for Austria and got a lot of points. I still don't think I'd have won the readathon. But Sophie's little friend, Leon, who used to go to school with her, has gone back to Poland where he lived originally. And so she is obsessed with anything to do with Poland. And so I knew when Poland was one of the stories in this book, she was going to want me to read it for Poland. And so I did. So if you are looking for one for many... of the different, there's certain countries that you're looking for, it probably exists in that book called The House of Cats, and it's worth a read because, like I say, you can read it quite quick. And then the last one I listened to was off Borrow Box. It was for Greece, and it was called One Greek Summer. It was the equivalent of 300 pages, and I gave it 3 stars. It's about a girl who works on a film set. And she works on multiple film sets, but her mum is like the big wig on the set, and so she's always tried to live outside of her mum's limelight and do her own thing, but her mum really desperately needed somebody to work on this job, and so she asked her daughter to do it, and she said yes, and so she's up against those kind of feelings from other cast members that she's not got there by herself. There's a bit of romance involved. You're not sure if she's going to be in a romance with one person who she's got a bit of history with, or a local person who she meets. Yeah, it was nice. I could imagine reading this on the beach. So yeah, they're all 20 of my books. As I said, I think Walking Back to Happiness by Penelope Swithenbank was my favourite. But yeah, I just want to say again to everybody who took part, I loved it again. Thank you so much. We've built a right community here. So you've got people like me and the Crazy G Lady have been there since 2020. Because I look back over some of the names who've been there all along. So we've been there since the very beginning. Then that second year seemed to be where a lot of the mainstayers came and stayed. So Ellie from Earl Grey Books came the second year. Yeah, there's multiple people who came in that second year. But from that second year till now, so we've been doing it for 3, 4. This was year 6. So we've got our mainstayers of the community who are there every year, and they look forward to it every year, and some of who say that's the only readathon they do, which is really very flattering considering how many amazing readathons are out there. I wish I could just do the one and just do mine, but I can't, because I love taking part in readathons, and I will be talking in a future video about my June TBR, in which I will be taking part in another readathon. So you've got your mainstayers and the people who are there every year. Then you've got the people who pick and choose, some years they've not took part because they've got too much on or whatever, which is fine, and then they'll come back and it'll be like welcoming back in the fold. And then because you've got these lovely people, they take every newbie that we get each year under the wing, and it's just lovely to see that Discord start buzzing again. So yeah, and again, like previous years, then we get people towards the end who go, oh, I didn't know this was going on, I can't wait to take part. I've already had a YouTuber get in touch with me, I think it was yesterday, to say I had no clue this was going on. Can't wait for next year. So I said, put it in your diary. Although I will say to everybody now, keep in mind that junior version will be going on in November. Last year it was October to November. I only do it for 2 weeks, but the Junior Eurovisionathon is later in November. So Junior Eurovisionathon has got a date in December now, so it'll be 1 week of November, 1 week of December. Look on the Twitter, that's where I'll post about it. Ask to join the Discord, that's where I'll post about it. So I'm doing a mini version for 2 weeks, last week in November, first week in December. And then, as always, when it comes to April next year, there will be another round that will be for 4 weeks. It will go into May, and it will end when the song contest starts. So yes, I will post some pictures of things, maybe a bit of a leaderboard or some stats, but you've already pretty much heard them anyway, and you can see all that on Twitter, Instagram and Discord. and I look forward to next year. So thank you for this. I will see you soon.